At the end of every podcast, there's the credits and it lists all the people who are involved. And you can see that and not really understand quite like how much work goes into every podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. First up is the Herbs with Rosalee Student Spotlight. Each week we take a moment to celebrate one of our amazing students and their inspiring contributions to our herbal community. This week our spotlight shines on Melissa Lewis from Connecticut. In addition to taking the Healing Powers of Tea course, Melissa spent most of 2024 in our Rooted Medicine Circle program. With her keen sense of wonder and curiosity, her reviews were a delight to read as she followed along on the certificate path. One of the time-honored practices in Rooted Medicine Circle is having a sit spot. And Melissa wrote about her sit spot often, and it just sounded so beautiful and peaceful and grounding. This is what she wrote about her sit spot. It allows me to take a small break from the various demands in my life and just be in the present, and I love this. I love that too. In addition, Melissa created a gorgeous and comprehensive newsletter on a few of the native plants of Connecticut for her capstone project. And her photos and style design were just a feast for the eyes. Well done, Melissa. So in appreciation for Melissa's contributions, Mountain Rose Herbs is sending her a $50 gift certificate to stock up on their incredible selection of sustainably sourced herbal supplies. I love Mountain Rose Herbs. I've been buying from them for over 20 years. I love them for their top quality organic spices, their herbal remedies, and even those elusive botanicals that can be hard to find. With their wide range of products and nationwide shipping, they're a trusted source for all things herbal. So I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Mountain Rose Herbs for celebrating our amazing students. If you'd like to explore Mountain Rose Herbs' offering and support this show, you can find the special link in the show notes. I'm a big fan of behind-the-scenes stories, apparently even when it comes to my own podcast and school. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce my guest, Emilie Thomas-Anderson. She serves as the project manager for this podcast. In a nutshell, that means that Emilie oversees the entire production process from start to finish. It was such a treat for me to sit down with her for this episode, and I'm so glad that you get to hear from her too. I'm pretty sure she's the first guest to do original artwork to prep for this episode. Very impressive. But in all seriousness, while I might be the face of Herbs with Rosalee, it's important to me that you know there's an amazing team working behind the scenes to support everything we do. Emilie's an integral part of that, and I can't wait for you to get to know her. For those of you who don't already know her, Emilie Thomas-Anderson has worked with plants and people in retail nurseries for over 2 decades. She's a former high school chemistry teacher with a lifelong passion for teaching. As a team member here at Herbs with Rosalee, she enjoys answering student questions and supporting our broader herbal community. Emilie also manages this podcast production and nerds out on proofreading everything she can get her hands on, which, side note, is something I'm very grateful for. Emilie lives in a small town nestled in the valley of the Santa Cruz Mountains of California. She's a home herbalist, a homeschooling mom, and a total plant nerd. If you ever need to find her, look in the garden for the barefoot woman with a hoary sticking out of her back pocket and plant matter in her hair. Emilie, I'm truly excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Hi, Rosalee. Thank you for having me.
Wow. So like a year ago, I never knew that this would happen. I feel like you have become such a big part of my life in the past year. So that's really exciting. And
I personally love behind the scenes stuff, so I'm excited to get to behind the scenes. I'm also really excited to hear more about you and your plant journey and to get to know you better. So let's start there. Go ahead and just share everything that's brought you to us here today.
Everything. Okay.
Everything.
Well, so I've always kind of been like a tree hugging hippie. I grew up in a small town in the Santa Cruz Mountains in this very backyard that I'm sitting in right now.
Oh, wow.
Under same apple tree that I was eating apples from as a kid. And
Oh,
when I wasn't inside reading a book as a small child, I was outside playing. We're not on a lot of land, but there's like an orchard that is kind of behind the house that connects this property to my dad's property. And I played there a lot and like was kind of going back and forth a lot from here to there. There still is this small patch of bay laurel trees. They're huge. They're like massive trees. But there's only like, I don't know, maybe a half dozen or so of them. But when I was a kid, we would go through that and it was the big woods that we would walk through, the big, dark, deep woods from one house to the other. And I don't know. So like being outdoors and living among the redwoods and climbing trees and balancing on logs and building forts and finding little hidey holes everywhere has always been kind of a big part of my life.
hmm.
And we always had veggie gardens growing up here at like when I lived here with both of my parents. And then when they split up, my dad always had a veggie garden and my mom always had a veggie garden. And I planted countless fruit trees with my dad. And so plants have always been there with me and for me. And then as I became like an adult and had a space of my own, I always had veggie gardens and wanted them bigger and better. And I wanted to grow more and more of my own food. And like after college, I even thought about doing a farming apprenticeship at UC Santa Cruz, where I did college. Never ended up doing that, but I always loved growing things and tending to things and harvesting and processing and all that went into that. And then I mean, I never really knew anything about herbs beyond like culinary herbs or like throat coat tea until I was pregnant. And, people suggest you drink the raspberry tea. And so I did that. And then I had my babies. And like with the first one, I had trouble producing enough milk. And so my acupuncturist had me on certain herbs for that. And then I just like started researching, and I was sitting around with a baby all day for most of my days. And so I spent a lot of time just reading homesteading blogs and learning about, more of that end of things. And that I think that's what brought me to the herbs and making my own medicine. And I think elderberry syrup was the first thing that I made beyond just tea,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so here I am.
I love that. I know a lot of people who it was having their own kids like brought the herbs into their life, which I think is just really interesting thing that it's almost like in some ways like the kids inspired it unbeknownst,
Mhm.
to them, but it's almost like there's this generation of children that inspired their parents to find the
Yeah.
plants for them, so that's really wonderful.
Yeah, totally. And being able to like make medicine for them when they're feeling sick and not have to just take them to the doctor and get prescribed something that,
Mm.
it's just so much easier when I have my own plants to draw on.
Yeah, and how old are your kids now?
12 and 8 and then almost 7.
Wow. And I'm just personal interest question. What were some
Mhm.
of your favorite books as a kid, and are your kids reading those books now?
I've loved the Redwall series,
Mm.
which my oldest has read probably 3 or 4 times all of the books. I still have all my old copies. I loved like all the books by Gary Paulson, like Hatchet and all those other books, like outdoorsy people doing adventures and, getting
Cool.
stuck in the outdoors and what they had to deal with. Yeah, things like on that theme.
Did you ever read Girl of the Limberlost? This is just personal question.
Yes, I did. And I found it because like all my old books are in my kids' bookshelf now. And I found it again maybe a year or 2 ago and I reread it and it was so good.
Oh, yeah, that's one that I've read like numerous times over and over again. That I think, I don't know, in there, I feel like that yearning, as she's going out and, participating in the world and just like her, I don't know, there's just that yearning, to have that connection with the outdoor world that I really resonate with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for satisfying my I love young adult fiction. So when I hear someone's a reader, I'm always just like, ooh, let's talk about it. Well, I have a lot more questions about stuff in terms of like your plant path, but I think we'll get to that a little bit later. Now let's dive into your chosen plant, which I'm always excited to see what guests choose, but there was something, I don't know, with you that I was like, oh, I just really wonder what she's going to choose. And you've chosen black walnuts. And I'm curious, why did black walnut jump out at you as the plant to share today?
So I actually had a discussion with my husband when we were hiking, like a couple of years ago, before I worked with you. And it was like, well, what if you were ever on Herbs with Rosalee? What herb would you choose? And
Really?
so I already had it chosen.
Wow.
It was like redwood would be cool because it's so local. Calendula would be cool because I love that herb, but that's, been done a lot. And cleavers would be great too. I use cleavers a lot and love that plant. But black walnut is one that I spend so much time with every year, like mostly in the late summer and fall, just like hours and hours and hours processing nuts, basically. I do I have used it medicinally, but only a little bit. And just starting this year, actually like a month ago was the first time I ever worked with it medicinally. But every year it's like our ritual, my ritual that my kids join in and my husband kind of reluctantly is adjacent to. But we go out and gather nuts. Like we'll just be going on our daily walk and my kids are usually the ones who spot the first nuts on the ground and they gather them up and they're like, Mom, look, here are the first walnuts. And yeah, I spend a lot of time going on walks around the town or in the next town over, finding all the black walnut trees that I think some were planted, as like when the area was being populated by settlers. And I'm sure a lot of them were they dropped on their own. And so I gather a lot of them. They're on like all of the streets around, and I have some props actually.
Oh,
so
nice.
I have a big one right here. I have a little one right here, and they come in like all different sizes. I don't know if that is because they like naturally, like if it's just variation within the species or if it's like hybrids maybe with other walnut species like English walnut and others that may be around. But yeah, I spent a lot of time gathering them and then peeling the hull off and drying them and working with the hull as a paint and cracking the nuts and eating the nuts. And I always feature in like my Thanksgiving sweet potato recipe. So yeah, that's why I chose it. I love it.
I love that. I love that you have such a relationship with it and you've just started to use it as medicine, because I think that is something I like to bring up a lot, is that we can have these transformative relationships with plants, have these traditions with plants that are so important to
Mhm.
us, and they don't have to be used as medicine or good for something, in that sense. Like
Mhm.
they can be really transformative on their own. Um, so I am curious, like I haven't worked with the black walnuts a lot, but I hear that they can be like kind of difficult to process. Like your hands can turn black. I definitely worked with it enough to know that. Or brown, or so they get stained. They can be hard to crack too. Like those are not
Mhm.
easy. Do you have any tips about like actually the harvest and how to go about processing them?
Sure, yeah. So, you I don't pick them. I just wait for them to fall.
Mhm.
And you can find them on the ground at many different stages. I like to gather them when they're still fresh and the hull is still green and like plump,
Mm.
rather than having turned brown, because by the time they've turned, or black, because by the time they've changed color, they're often, well, they're juicy and harder to deal with. And they often form mold on that hull, which is just not pleasant to work with. So I
Mhm.
gather them when they're green and then take them home and, as quickly as possible, remove that hull. And there's a couple ways that I've done that. You can sit there and methodically slice it off with a knife and then like use sandpaper to get all the excess off. I rarely do that. You can I have heard of this method, but I've never done it. But people will often like pile them up in a driveway and roll over them with their car, and that removes the hole without breaking the nut, because it is really a tough nut to crack. But what I usually do is I'll put one or two nuts just on the driveway and roll my foot over it, like wearing a
Hmm.
sturdy shoe, and just like kind of apply a little pressure and roll my foot over that to remove the hole. And it stains the driveway and it stains my shoe, and that's okay. Um,
I'm curious, do you feel it through your shoe? Like, are you getting a little foot massage at
yeah,
the same time?
yeah,
Nice. I like
yeah,
it.
it's great. And I gather way more nuts than I can ever possibly process, just because it is kind of time consuming, and I don't do the run it over with a car thing. Um, and then they kind of sit and form mold, and I'll throw them to the squirrels, and they
Mm.
don't mind. Um, and then they need to be dried, or else like any little remnants of that black juicy hull that is left on the outside will just form mold really quickly. So you can put them out in the sun to dry them if you don't have any squirrels, or I like to put them just in a tray by the wood stove to
Mm.
dry in a single layer so they don't mold again. Um, and then once they're dried, they're ready to crack. You can crack them fresh, but if you want to store them, they need to be dried. And to crack them, my trick is I send my 3 children out to the back deck with hammers
Nice.
and I have them do it.
Mm. And
But
they're pretty willing on this account. They're like, yeah, give me the hammer. All
they are
about it
pretty willing for a while.
for a while.
It's usually enough to get the cup or so that I need for whatever recipe I'm making.
So
And
you
they'll
crack
snack
as needed
on.
then.
Yeah, I crack as needed. It would be too much to try and do them all at once.
Mhm.
Yeah. So they just take a hammer, put it on the deck, maybe with like a piece, like a board or something under, so they don't dent the deck with the really hard nut, and just whack away.
Emilie, just a second ago, I saw a squirrel like going along the top of your fence over there, and I just love it. It's just very appropriate. The squirrel's like, "What? Black
Mhm.
walnuts? Cool. I
I
want
have
in."
I have a bowl of them right next to me.
Nice,
So
nice. Well, the recipe that you shared with us, I'm very curious to hear more about, and this is using black walnuts hulls as paint. So please tell me more.
yeah, so when you work with fresh black walnuts, they will stain everything they touch. So my fingers are like, for probably a good 2 months in the summer and fall, if not more, my fingers are stained just a dark brown color. the more I've been working with them, the darker they are. And so that hull makes a really good paint as well. And I've heard of people using it to dye fabric. I haven't done that. But for the recipe that I wrote up, you basically take the dried hull. I'm sure you could do it fresh, but I haven't tried that. But I dry the hull and then just simmer it down in some water for 20 minutes or so until I get a nice dark black, like almost thick watercolor paint that then you can paint with. And I actually...
Oh, good. I was just about to ask. Oh, wow.
So I painted a little walnut branch there.
I love that with the leaf.
I'm not an artist, so it's not amazing, but...
Oh, it's amazing. I'm impressed.
It's a nice, like, brown, like a dark brown color.
It's super solid. Like, that's not like, oh, that's like a paint, a very faint paint. Like, that's solid right there.
Yeah, it's nice. It's pretty nice. So.
Yeah. Oh, fun. Cool. Did the kids get in on this too? Like, is this part of the joy?
Not on this particular batch, but my daughter specifically loves to create art and especially to paint. So she does get in on it.
Oh, fun. Oh, that's really lovely. Yeah, I'm actually surprised. Even I have worked with black walnut as a dye for fabrics. And it really does work super well. But even I'm still surprised at how just dark and solid that is. So that's really cool. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing the recipe to do that. And yeah, it makes sense that just when you're working with black walnut, staining everything, it's just like, oh, let's just put this to good use. Then let's be intentional about the stains.
Yeah, I thought about dyeing my hair for this interview, but...
Ooh, that'd be like all in.
Yeah, I didn't get around to it.
Yeah, next time. So you'd mentioned that you just started using black walnut as medicine, and I'm curious about that if you'd like to share.
Sure. So black walnut is like, it's got antibacterial properties, antifungal properties, and antiparasitic properties. And it was the antiparasitic properties that I was using it for. Don't know if you want me to go into any detail on that, but I made a tincture of it last year, just for fun, because I hadn't done it before. And I don't know, I thought maybe someday I'd have a use for black walnut hull tincture. So I made a tincture of the green hulls last year. When I did that, I cut the hulls off of the nut instead of squashing them with my foot, so they would stay nice and clean.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. And like I tasted it here and there, like between last year and this year, but I never really like took it, you know. But then I felt like I needed some antiparasitic action. And so I took it for a couple of weeks, like last month. And within like a day, I noticed changes that told me that it was working. I don't know how much detail.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
So I think I'll leave it at that. I noticed changes that indicated that it was working like pretty well right away. And that was amazing for me. And like, speaking of the antibacterial properties and going kind of back to the paint, it's amazing how long that paint lasts in the fridge. I think on the recipe I indicated it would last like a week, but I have a batch that has been in there for 6 weeks now, and it's not moldy, it's not funky smelling, it is just like fresh and totally usable. It's what I used to make this painting just a couple days ago. So yeah.
Did you make that painting for us for this podcast?
I did.
Wow. You're just a star, Emilie. Like, you get your gold star, everything. Absolutely. One thing we kind of glossed over, I think maybe a little bit, is like you go to a lot of effort harvesting, prepping, drying, all the stuff. Like, why would you do that for a nut? You could go to the store, just FYI, and like buy a bag of them for like not too much money.
Well, I couldn't go to the store and buy black walnuts. I could go to the store and buy English walnut.
Good point.
But I love the process. I love the ritual of it. I love that like it connects me to the trees in my community in a really strong and close way. And like I know the different trees. There's some trees that produce these big huge nuts. There's some trees that are smaller, some are earlier and some are later. I get to watch the squirrels gathering them, like either from the trees where I'm gathering or from my porch where I've left them because I forgot to bring them in. The crows every year are really fun to watch. Like there's one enormous tree. It's probably the biggest one in the area that's just yonder. And it hangs over one of the main intersections in the town. And in the fall, it drops its nuts, cars roll over them, and the crows swoop down in between the cars and like pick at the nuts because they've already been whole. And then they fly away, and they're so entertaining to watch. So yeah, it's that like that nature connection part of it that I really love. And I especially have a connection with walnut because like starting about 4 years ago was when I like really felt bonded with it. We had a big fire come through our area and I had to be evacuated, and I had just gathered like a sack full of walnuts right before we had to be evacuated. And I was like, what am I going to do with these nuts? What am I going to pack with me on like as I'm being evacuated? And I brought the nuts with me, and it was like hulling them and processing them was a way to keep my sanity while I was out like fretting and worrying about my town being burned down, which thankfully my home wasn't, but a lot of people's were, unfortunately. But yeah, that just like brought me even closer to the plant and made me look forward every year to gathering.
Those are all really just, I don't know, powerful, beautiful stories that again is just that beautiful relationship between plants and people. And yeah, and just I often like have this vision of like, I don't know, if we just go to the store and like as you mentioned, you can't really buy black walnut, at least the nuts at the store or whatever. But if you just go to the store and buy any plant, like there's something missing there. And I'm not saying I never do that. You know, I'm not a purist in any way, shape, or form, but I definitely recognize the power in that healing process, that connection process of everything that you're talking about versus, you know, making plants a purely transactional experience of like, oh, I put down money and I got this thing. And I don't know much about, you know, where that tree grew or how the crows harvest the the nuts from it. So yeah, I think that to me again, that's just like the heart of herbalism. I mean, that's kind of that's why I keep showing up. Absolutely.
Yeah, you don't open the cupboard and see like a bag of nuts and go, "Oh, I remember spending time with that tree," you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but when we have like an apothecary filled with all of those experiences. And I also like one thing that also strikes me about what you're talking about is the years of relationship that goes into it. And you've had good times with walnut, you've had traumatic times with walnut. All of that comes together to form this relationship. That's just not, you can't substitute that in a day of experience even.
Right.
You know, it's something that builds time. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share about black walnut before we move on?
I think we've about covered it. Yeah, I'll probably think of something later. But
all right, well, feel free to chime in anything else that pops into your mind later. Yeah, so Emilie, my experience of you is I can't even remember my first experience of you because it feels like you've been there for such a long time, so consistently. And before we started recording, I was talking about how like Emily's always outside. Um, and I've seen, we've been in class together for years now, and you always have the tree behind you, oftentimes with leaves, but yeah, always outside. And I remember talking about you long before like we even met. I would just be like, Emily is the star student. Emily's always there. Emily
Mm.
always has the best questions. All this kind of stuff. So I just had that on my mind. And then after a while, I was like, I wish Emily was on the team. I truly had that desire well before it ever came to fruition. And then when it finally did come to fruition, I was just like, I called it. I knew it years ago. This is Emily. And what's interesting about you being on the team too is you were kind of hired in one position and you have grown into doing a lot of things. um, so yeah, we'll get into all of that, I guess. But my first question for you is what has been surprising for you going from student to being a major part of the team? What's that process been like and what surprised you?
Well, so at the end of every podcast, there's the credits and it lists all the people who are involved. And you can see that and not really understand quite like how much work goes into every podcast and like how many people really are very deep into it and very involved. And that's really what surprised me. It's just like how much effort and how many people's time and skills and love for getting this done and like out to the masses, like how much goes into each episode and each class and just all the complex things that go into it. It just, when I'm watching it, it's just like, or when I used to watch it without being involved, it was like, oh, beautiful, nice. Rosalee just interviewed someone and then there it is.
There it is. Yeah.
But there's a lot.
Yeah. I feel like that's something that still completely surprises me too, especially just, I started like having a blog, I think in 2008, and then I started the newsletter, and then it's just been like, growth from there. But like lately, because really in the past 2 years, the team has grown. And then with the podcast, especially, things have really grown in terms of like needing a whole team to support the podcast. And it's strange for me at times too to be like, oh, this isn't just me anymore. Like this is a whole team. And it's such an amazing thing for me to have all of this support to bring forth, the vision. And like you said, I feel like there's a lot of love that goes into it. I would like to think, like we're so many, not all of us on the team are plant people. We don't all need to be plant people, but we all, I think, have a really good feeling about the plants and just the services that we offer to everybody. And kind of along that line of what goes into it, I would like to talk about what you do with the podcasts. So you kind of fell into this position with Nicole, who's still very much a big part of the team. Used to be the kind of the project manager for the podcast, and then somehow just along the way that got handed off to you. You just keep doing such a phenomenal job. And yeah, I think you first started doing the show notes a little bit, and then you did such a great job with the show notes. That's something I couldn't do. Like if I had to turn around and like write compelling show notes after I just did I'm just like, that's not a skill of mine. And I feel like every week I'm just so absolutely like pleased and just like, whoa, Emily just did a great job with those show notes. But a lot goes into the show notes too. Do you want to go over some of that? Like it's not just a description, there's other aspects of it.
The show notes are like the last thing I do. So you record the interview and then that goes to Francesca, who edits all the audio and video. And before that even goes to Francesca, actually, there's the various illustrations that need to be created. There's the recipe card that needs to be created. There's the thumbnail for YouTube that needs to be created. And then everything goes off to Francesca and she does the editing. And then comes back to me, and then the transcript is created, and then that is where I start writing the show notes. Is like once the transcript is created, I read through that, kind of like skim it for like main points, and then get an idea of what happened, what was discussed in the episode. And I kind of forget what exactly you asked me. Where was I going with this?
I kind of forgot too, but everything you said right now is just really interesting because I'm like, oh yeah, and then that and that. Like I often make the joke, like I think maybe even say this in the credits, but I often tell guests, I'm like, I just show up. Like everyone else like does all the hard work. There's so much that goes into it. And the one thing that was fascinating about you being a guest on the show is that you had this other perspective of what it's like to be a guest on the show. And you pointed out, we really ask a lot of our guests, which is true. And I said, I think a lot of podcasts ask a lot of their guests, because I know I've been on shows where I'm supposed to come up with like the title and the description, even the questions that people ask me, which by the way is not my favorite. I don't think that's a cool thing to do. But we actually changed how we changed some things about the podcast guest process because of you went in as a guest, and we stimulated a conversation, and we did things because we asked the guests to give us standard things like a bio, but then we ask everybody to come up with a recipe pretty much. We don't require it. Not everybody's recipe people, but we do love the recipes here. So we require that. And so they have to write the recipe and, all of that. So yeah, there's a lot. I just wanted to like give love to the guests too. It's like the team does a lot, but the guests is that co-creative vision of coming together and making it happen.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot that goes on like before the guest is even brought on for the episode. They have to do a lot, and then there's a lot of back and forth, and yeah, it's pretty impressive, this dance that goes on, I think.
Yeah, it is. I didn't know that getting started with the podcast. I don't know if that would have maybe been too intimidating. So it's probably a good thing I didn't know it. We also just do things that like are unnecessary, but that we love. So like, we don't have to have a recipe with everything, but then if we do a recipe, we don't have to have Tatiana illustrate it into a beautiful recipe card. But these are the little things that give me joy. So we have to do it to some degree.
So yeah, there's all these little pieces that you don't have to do. You could just record an interview and have that be it. But I think all those little pieces are part of what makes the Herbs with Rosalee podcast unique and like much loved by the audience too. I remember being on that end and being like, "Ooh, what's the recipe that's coming with this one? Oh, I have all those herbs. I can make that," and how beautifully everything is illustrated. And
props to Tatiana.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that reflection. Yeah, it is an absolute joy. And I think that's the thing. Like, it is so much work to do the podcast, but it doesn't feel like a burden. It's at least, again, I just already said, like, I just show up. So there's that. But just, for the whole school and everything, it just feels like such a beautiful thing. And, my joy is getting to talk to folks, of course, and bring that. And I have the same excitement. I'm always like, ooh, what are they going to choose as their herb? What's the recipe going to be like? And yeah, it's just been wonderful. It did start, during COVID times. And so it was a great way to like be able to interact with herbalists and during that time. And now that we're post that, it's just still been a really fabulous way to sit down and talk to people and get to know them better. So originally you were brought onto the team to do community support and help to answer questions, especially on the weekends, because we had Karen doing weekdays. And I just felt like for the school, especially, a lot of people do their work on the weekend. And I thought, oh, what a bummer for them if, somebody is like sits down on Saturday to like get, started on their, work. And then maybe there's a technical problem, or maybe they have a question that they need to like get answered before they can move forward. And I thought, what a bummer that would be that they have to wait till Monday. So that was kind of the original vision of having you on the team. I don't know how long that lasted. I can't remember. timeline, but it's like pretty quickly that was like not just what you were doing. It was yeah. And I know by August, I remember the whole team took off August except you and me, and we just like buckled down and we got so much work done as we were preparing for Herbal Energetics course. But my question to you is, so the podcast is one thing you do. You are, you still, you're just a wonderful person for answering questions, helping people support it along the way. So you do that as well. I'm curious, like, what do you love the most? No pressure coming from me, but what do you love the most about working here? Or maybe even like, what are you most proud of in terms of just the contributions you make to the team as a whole?
Those are totally separate questions, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I love working on the podcast. And, well, maybe they're not totally separate questions. I absolutely love proofreading things. And that has become a big part of what I do. And I think that's probably what I'm most proud of, because it's like, I don't know, it's my little contribution into making everything that is put out a little more beautiful, like making sure everything's in its like top-notch form. So yeah, I proofread as much as I can because I love doing it. It's been something that like I've always wanted to do, because I'll see something like our little local town newspaper and I'll see errors in it and be like, come on. someone must have edited this, but things slip through the cracks, and so that's what I'm there for, is to catch things that have slipped.
Oh my gosh, Emilie, I love that so much. Maybe the thing that I'm most proud that you do is the editing. I feel like first I feel like I should just be like, hi, something to know about me, I really need an editor. Because I am not a details person. I just don't see mistakes, and I make plenty mistakes, just not knowing any better. And then I just don't see them. Like, I'm just a much more of like a big picture person. I'm not a very super detailed, except when it comes to images. I think visually I'm very detail oriented. But like grammar, I don't even know grammar really. So yeah, I really need an editor. And having you on board has been so phenomenal. And I think that was something that happened actually in August, is you started editing all the monographs for Herbal Energetics course. And I just, every time I would get, like all this red marks literally back from Emilie. And it was such a relief to me. Like, it was so wonderful and such a relief. Just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, every time you edit me, I'm just like, I feel so grateful, because I just see the quality of everything rising. I will say any mistakes that exist still are all because of me. So Emilie's not on Emilie is not on the line for it. They are so much better because you've seen them.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
it's
I do miss things.
Yeah,
things will come to me and I'll read them, and then I'll pass them back to like Jenny to create, and then they'll come back to me and I'll be like, ooh, I missed that, and that's huge. So there's still things in there that might be my fault.
If you miss things, it's because I give you so much to do. So yeah, I love having you as an editor has been so great. And yeah, I can't even remember how that really started, but somehow we're all on Slack. We all kind of work as a team. We all run stuff together. And I think you just started editing, and then it was like, oh, well, okay. Let's just keep going with that.
Yeah, I remember like there was one document that you put out there for everybody to look at, and I kind of went a little nuts with it. And I think that's how it started, was that one document.
Oh, I'm so glad it's a love of yours. And it's just, again, something I'm so grateful for. I feel like our students and, even listeners, everybody, they probably don't even know how grateful they are for you too. So that's great. You mentioned that, you listened to the podcast a long time ago. Is that how you first found Herbs with Rosalee, or do you remember how you first found us?
I was thinking about this, and I don't really remember. I'm sure it was before the podcast. I had Alchemy of Herbs. I don't remember how I came across that and ended up interested in it and buying it. But that was well before the podcast.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't really know. I did, like, I know I was doing Taste of Herbs very briefly when it was on Learning Herbs. Like, I had a little infant and I started the course and thought it was an amazing course, and then I just didn't follow through. But that was before the podcast. So yeah, I'm not really sure how I first learned about it all.
And do you remember what your first course was with Herbs with Rosalee?
Maybe cooling inflammation was probably, cooling inflammation, I think. Yeah.
Interesting. I it's hard for me to remember. But I thought it was Rooted Medicine Circle was my guess.
I was in the last like live version of cooling inflammation.
Okay.
And that was, I think, just a few months before I was in Rooted Medicine Circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I mean, you've just been around for so long. But I remember you very much being present in Rooted Medicine Circle, there for the live classes with the tree behind you. I think that made it like very like easy to remember you as like you had the tree. And oh my gosh, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I feel like there was other things, like you were in the Braiding Sweetgrass book club. Is that right? Yeah. So there was that. So we were interacting in that too. And we're in currently, when people are watching this, we're going to be in our last days of enrolling Rooted Medicine Circle. And I'm curious if somebody was wondering about Rooted Medicine Circle and wondering, like, is this the course for me? And they're on the fence. What would you say to them?
So I think this is a great question because I was in that position. I saw that Rooted Medicine Circle was opening up, and I just, I saw that it's about medicine making and nature connection and all these things that, like, I already did. I already made medicine for myself and my family, and I made medicinal teas and oils all the time. And there were other like preparations that I didn't rely on very much, but like I knew how to make them for the most part. There were a few in there, like hydrosols that I'd never done and incense making that I'd never done. But, I was just like, I know how to do that stuff. Do I really need a medicine making course? And then there's the nature connection thing. And I'm like, I'm grounded. I'm connected. Like I said at the beginning, I've been like a tree hugging hippie my whole life. So do I really need a course on that? But I ended up biting the bullet and just doing it. And like in part because of the Braiding Sweetgrass book club, and in part because of the idea of like connecting with other herbalists and like all the things that were built into the course to allow this connection between the students. And I did it, and I'm so glad that I decided to do Rooted Medicine Circle, because I learned, like, I knew how to make medicine, but I kind of upped my game, and I was already connected with the land around me, but like there were so many little pieces built into the course, like, that allowed me to see things differently or more deeply, or just consider the world around me in different ways than I had done before, and consider the way that I connect with the community around me, like the natural world, as well as like the human, not that that's not the natural world, but like the humans around me and like the other resources around me. And it's just such a beautiful course, and I'm so glad that I did it, and I learned so much from it, and I got so much out of it. And yes, that connection with the other herbalists in the course was amazing. And I think it's great for beginning herbalists because you learn all the medicine making like so well and so thoroughly, and there's time to really dig into each section, like each herbal preparation, and learn it very well. And get that connection with the plants and even learn about growing and cultivating the plants. So it's great for beginners, and it's great for people who think that they're like intermediate, or I think there have been some really experienced herbalists in the course as well. And it's just a beautiful course. I would say go for it.
Well, thank you for that, Emilie. And yeah, it's just been so amazing to have you on the team. It's been so amazing to have you just, I don't know, I feel like your gifts just keep shining through and, bringing so much. And I hope people listening, whether they're might be a student with Herbs with Rosalee courses or, podcast listener, that our conversation, they get to see like how much of what you do is infused with everything, because like you said, it could just be credits at the end of the podcast, where you mention you, but it's just such a beautiful thing, everything you bring. And it could easily be invisible, because you could look at the thing and, whatever written thing and just say, when you don't see mistakes, it's invisible. But I hope everybody knows now that I make a lot of mistakes, and Emilie saves us all from having to see them. Before we move on to your last question, is there anything else that we might have missed about your time at Herbs with Rosalee, or anything behind the scenes that we might have missed?
Well, I just want to say that like everybody on the team is so amazing, and I don't think we could do this without any of them. Like I certainly like I kind of help connect, like make the connections for the podcast, but there's so many other creative people with so many skills that like it just works together so well because of everybody involved.
That's so true. It's funny. It's a conversation I have with Xavier, my husband, all the time, that I just like how much I love the team and how everybody plays this really important role. And and it just feels like, like you said, like we couldn't do it without any one of them. Everyone bringing their special gifts to it all. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing in the whole team for that as well. Yeah. All right. Well, the last question I have for you is, what would you include in your herbal first aid kit?
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to ask this question. So my herbal first aid kit is mostly just like growing out in the garden. Or it's just single herbs that I have, in jars in the house. But there's a few things I rely on a lot. Comfrey is one, plantain and yarrow and calendula and chamomile. But like the one herb that I bring with me everywhere, like literally it's in my bag anytime I go anywhere. I have a bit of it in my locker at my other job, where I work at the nursery, is yarrow. And I always have yarrow with me because I can be a little bit accident prone, and I have small children and they are always, getting nicks and scrapes and cuts. And I love yarrow for like, it helps stop bleeding. It helps prevent infection. I will do like foot baths with it if I've got like a horrible splinter or something like that. I actually was at my work at the nursery once, and I was working out in the demo garden, and I cut my finger really badly with some pruners. I like really cut the fleshy part of my finger, and I went in, and I luckily had it yarrow in my locker, and I put a wad of it on there and wrapped it up, and I probably should have gone and gotten stitches, and I didn't, and like it was healed within just a few days. Or maybe fully healed within like a week. But, it was nothing to worry about, even though it was a pretty nasty little cut. So I just love yarrow. And I also I like to include it in bitters recipes sometimes too. So there's just so much that yarrow can do, like even beyond what I've just said. I mostly just talked about wound care, but I love yarrow. I love the smell of the yarrow and the taste of yarrow. So
me too. It's such a phenomenal plant. And that's like, if I'm ever asked that question that like no one wants to be asked, like what one herb would you want, if you were on an island? I think I would choose yarrow because like you said, it has it's phenomenal. Like all the gifts of yarrow is just goes on and on and on. And some herbs do one thing really well. And yarrow, I feel like does
Mhm.
50 things really well. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's amazing.
I also love the taste of yarrow, but recently I have come to terms with the fact that I don't love it as a tea. I love to just like I'll nibble on it a lot when it's out growing, and I really love it as a tincture, like a fresh herb tincture. It has its like
Mhm.
almost like the pure taste of yarrow is just so good, that aromatic bitterness. But recently I was trying to drink it as a tea, and it might have been I was making it too strong or something, but there was something about the
Mm.
tea that I was like, this is not the best thing ever. It was like on its own too, so it wasn't mixed with anything. It was
Mhm.
rough. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, do you drink the tea very much?
No, I actually never have.
Hmm.
I I use it as like a poultice or a bath or a tincture.
Yeah, it's really lovely combined with elderflower. Like that's kind of the one way that
Mhm.
I've had it before. But yeah, I think
Oh,
it's just easy to
you're right.
overdo a strong yarrow tea.
That's right. I have actually taken it as a tea and given it to my kids as a tea. I forgot all about that, combined with elderflower and peppermint. Yeah, but never solo, and I've never had it as a plain. Before we wrap up, I actually talking about the flavor of yarrow brought me to one more thing I wanted to say about walnut, if I can.
Please, I'm so glad. Let's circle back to walnut.
So so walnut, like, I was doing some reading about it recently, and, the monograph I was reading was like, "Oh, it's just terribly bitter. It has a horrible flavor." And I was just like, "Really? I love the flavor of walnut." It's, like, similar to yarrow. So many people just think it's horrible tasting, but to me, it's, like, almost spiced in flavor. Yes, it's bitter, but it's got, like, a bit of, like, warm spice flavor to it that I really love. Um, and it reminds me a lot of a liqueur that I had when I was in the Czech Republic that I don't know if they use it as a digestive or an antiparasitic or what, but it's like this liqueur that they're famous for. And so I wonder if that's an ingredient in it, but I think the flavor is amazing and I want to include it in some bitters recipes, I think, or
Mm.
even just in cocktails. I think it's fantastic.
Oh, lovely. Of course, you would love it because you just have this wonderful relationships with walnut and have worked with walnut so
Mhm.
much. It is just escaping me right now, but there is a very famous preparation of black walnut. That's like a digestive liqueur, and there's a particular name, and I want to say it comes out of like Russia. And I
Hmm.
know there's going to be listeners who know what I'm talking about. It's just escaping me for the moment. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's quite yummy. Um,
Yeah.
and it's
The one that
bitter kind of way.
Yeah, the one that I'm talking about is called, and I'll probably butcher this, but it's called Becherovka out of the Czech Republic. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's the
yeah, it
same one
wasn't
you're
bad.
talking about.
Not that I know of, but
Yeah.
oh yeah, I want to say it starts with like an O or something. But I really love the way you said that. That was lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, Emily, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you so much for being on the team. Thank you so much for running the podcast, much less being on it, and just all of your wonderful contributions and all you do for the whole team and for all of our students. And yeah, just thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Yay. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to head over to the show notes at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com to download your beautifully illustrated recipe card and to get a transcript of this show. If you're excited to be a confident herbal medicine maker, then you'll love Rooted Medicine Circle. We enroll this live course only once a year, and time's running out. Visit rootedmedicinecircle.com or visit the show notes for all the details to sign up. If you'd like more herbal episodes to come your way, one of the best ways to support this podcast is by subscribing on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks, and I'm so glad that you're here as part of this herbal community. Also, a big round of thanks to the people all over the world who make this podcast happen week to week. Emilie Thomas-Anderson is the project manager who oversees the entire podcast operation, from guest outreach to writing show notes and on and on. I often tell people, I just show up. Emilie does most of the heavy lifting. Nicole Paul is the operator for the entire Herbs with Rosalee school and community. She keeps an eagle-eye view on everything to ensure it's running smoothly. Francesca is our fabulous video and audio editor. She not only makes listening more pleasant, she also adds beauty to the YouTube videos with plant images and video overlays. Tatiana Rusakova is the botanical illustrator who creates gorgeous plant and recipe illustrations for us. I love them, and I know you love them. Once the illustration is ready, Jenny creates the recipe cards as well as the thumbnail images for YouTube. Alex is our behind-the-scenes tech support and social media manager, and Karen and Emily are our student services coordinators and community support. If you've written in with a question, undoubtedly you got help from them. For those of you who like to read along, Jennifer is who creates the transcripts each week. Xavier, my handsome French husband, is the cameraman and website IT guy. It takes an herbal village to make it all happen, including you. Thank you so much for your support through your comments, reviews, and ratings. One of my favorite things about this podcast is hearing from you. I read every comment that comes in, and I'm excited to hear your herbal thoughts about walnut. Okay, you've lasted to the very end of the show, which means you get a gold star and this herbal tidbit. Well, as I mentioned, I'm somebody who really benefits from an editor, and Emily has been absolutely fantastic at editing our course materials. In addition to looking at my class scripts and updating previous articles and monographs, she's also been editing my class slides. Well, the other day she had some feedback on a slide with a chemical structure on it. It was serotonin, to be exact. She pointed out that while it was a pretty image, it was hard to notice the double bonds. So I can't fully explain all the emotions I had when she pointed this out. It was funny to me in a certain way because no one besides her would notice that it's hard to notice the double bonds, right, in this image. Okay, maybe 2 other people in the history of Herbs with Rosalee would notice that. But it wasn't just funny haha though. I also just thought it's so super cool that she knew that. And without a doubt, her keen eye is really elevating our offerings. Another way Emily has been a wonderful addition to the team is through her plant growing experience. For the past couple decades, Emily has worked at plant nurseries, so she really knows her stuff. One of the bonus mini courses within Rooted Medicine Circle is the Grow course, which shows you all you need to know to get your herbal garden started. During the creation of that course, as well as our live Q&A segments, Emily has been able to lend her expertise. Thanks, Emily.